We have with us Michael Waltz, who is a congressman from Florida, Green Beret vet, combat vet. How are you, sir?
Doing great, Mark. Doing great.
What do you think of that line from my
here with Zelensky?
Yeah, hold on 1 second. What do you think of that line from my friend Tom Rose, who said, $800 million for Ukraine, but Biden wants to give 15 to 90 billion to the Islamo-Nazi regime in Tehran? There's something to that, isn't there?
Well, yeah, and that's not even counting what they would make in the oil revenue once the spigots get turned back on, and then you add on top of that, the amount of business class seats that would be full coming from France and Germany to go do business within Iran. So you essentially will put the regime's coffers on steroids. The deal that they're anticipating would then lift the sanctions on IRGC. They're now flush with cash. Their proxies in Iran, in Lebanon, in Syria will be flush with cash, and they're still racing towards a nuclear weapon. It will be one of the most destabilizing deals, if you even call it that. Meanwhile, they'll be on a weapons buying spree to Moscow with the cash that we will release, and the rest of the Middle East will be off to the races for their own nuke. The first amongst them would be the Saudis getting the nuke, and you know where they'll get it, Mark? They'll get it from Pakistan, because the Saudis basically funded the Pakistani nuclear development back in the 90s, and Pakistan will hand it right over to them ready-made. So this is incredibly serious, and in some ways, I think even more serious than what's going on in Ukraine.
Let me ask you this: it's crucially important to secure our southern border. I've been talking about this for 20 years. When they had the Gang of 8 and then the Gang of 12 and the Gang of this, we organized our audience and I against it. So I take a backseat to nobody on this issue. But then the false comparison, if we're helping the Ukrainians secure their sovereignty, then why don't we support securing our sovereignty? First of all, Congressman, I say, we support both. But secondly, illegal aliens coming across the border, including many who are criminals and so forth, is something that really does need to be stopped. And it's something that Joe Biden doesn't seem to give a damn about. But there is, at least from an analytical point of view, the difference between an army of another country. So if the Mexican army came across the border for the purpose of conquering the United States, that would be the analogy, no?
No, I think you're absolutely right, and I think you're absolutely right that we can do both. And I think many folks complaining or having concerns that say, well, we should be prioritizing our border before any other are absolutely right as well. And that China is
how do we do that?
Greatest existential threat.
Hold on now. Hold on.
They both can be true.
Can we think this through?
Sure.
I don't disagree with you, but let's think this through. We should prioritize our border. Well, what should we do? We got Biden as president. He runs the bureaucracy. The Democrats run the Congress. We've been beating the drums about this for a year, and they ignore us. The courts ignore us. The borders are wide open. Okay, so I'm prioritizing it, and I'm talking about it, and we're organizing against it, and we need to throw these bums out. Got it. When it comes to Ukraine, it's as if, if we don't do the former, we can't do the latter. Yeah, that's what I'm hearing people say. We got to focus on the domestic. How about we focus on both?
That's right. Yeah, we're in violent agreement. Absolutely.
Yeah, there we go.
We can do both. We have to do both. And at the end of the day, if we don't take a stand, help the Ukrainians take a stand, that will be a slippery slope, not only in Europe, in the Middle East, and in Asia. So that will cost this country in terms of the global instability, in terms of the vacuum that communist China and Putin will fill as we see that relationship grow. And so you're absolutely right, Mark. We have to do both, and we can.
Let me ask you this, Congressman. You have the combat background. Xi is looking at this. I think the more Russia is bogged down in Ukraine with these heroic people who are fighting back, they just need the proper arms. They need their MiGs. They need whatever they can get. Not our troops, not our no-fly zone. Really, nobody's talking about that. There's a handful of people, but the vast majority of people aren't supporting that. But we are supporting giving them whatever they need in terms of armaments and so forth. We always seem to come short on that. I think Xi will look at this and maybe have second thoughts. And why aren't we now arming up the Taiwanese? I hear, well, it'll cause World War III if we do X, Y, Z with the Ukrainians now. Well, why don't we help the Taiwanese right now, knowing what the Chinese potentially have in mind?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. On the Ukraine side, you know what, Mark? Send them the damn MiGs. Send them the
Yes.
S-300s. Send them everything we possibly can that they need and that they've been asking for. I was out there last year, and they were asking for all of these systems that Biden is finally reluctantly, passively getting around to providing. On the Z issue, I think Z sees an opportunity to literally put Putin in his pocket. You are seeing banks in China begin to salivate at the buying opportunities in the Russian oil and gas sector, and particularly in the critical mineral sector, to shore up the Chinese economy, to shore up their supply chains, and to get even more global dominance than they already have in some of those critical sectors: lithium, cobalt, manganese, all of the things that make our modern economy go. So I think the economically, the Chinese see a buying opportunity, and to make Putin a junior partner to Z, and to create dependency from Russia on Z, because it's going to be the only backdoor that they have with this sanctions regime once it gets fully in place, if Biden would truly put it fully in place. In terms of militarily, you're absolutely right. We just met with the Taiwanese ambassador just a few days ago. They need to have Harpoon anti-ship missiles. They need to have sea mines. Our National Guard is beginning to work with theirs so that they can have a defense in depth, an insurgency, and a resistance. They have to be able to buy time until we can come help. And Mark, you and I and others have to constantly remind the American people, why does Taiwan matter? If Taiwan goes, Z then controls 50% of the global economy, 40% of global trade, access to South Korea, Japan, Australia, Malaysia. It will turn us into a continental power, and we will no longer be a global leader. And the threat briefings are telling us that Z will be prepared militarily within the next 5 to 8 years. But yet, when I go over to the Pentagon, they're looking at 10, 20, 30-year timelines to buy what we need, and they're dragging their feet on providing the Taiwanese what they need. It's a huge disconnect.
Congressman, can we hold you over after the bottom of the hour here?
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
More questions for Congressman Waltz. We'll be right back. Michael Waltz is the congressman from Florida's 6th Congressional District. By the way, what towns are in that district?
Oh, Daytona, home of NASCAR. I live in St. Augustine, which is the oldest city in America, by the way, continuous city. And it's in Northeast Florida. We touch Cape Canaveral and then up the coast to Jacksonville. It was Ron DeSantis's district in Congress when he ran for governor. I ran for his seat.
You know, I'm a citizen of Florida now.
Amazing. Many great Americans, 1,000 a day, are coming
1,000
to the
a day.
peninsula of freedom. So all are welcome.
Now, who is the congressman south of you?
A gentleman by the name of Bill Posey, who represents Cape Canaveral proper, and then south of that would be Brian Mast, combat veteran.
That's my congressman,
double
Brian
amputee.
He's a good man.
He's a great man. He's literally given half of himself for this country, and also served over in the IDF. Yeah,
he's absolutely fantastic. But you are too, Congressman. I mean, you have quite a combat record in your service, and you're still at it. I want to continue here. Tell the American people, I've discussed this at some length, but you tell the American people from your perspective why Ukraine does relate to our national security interests.
Yeah, well, this morning, Mark, I felt like members of Congress this morning when Zelensky was reminding us of who we are. which you do in your book, American Marxist, in terms of reminding us of our values. And I felt like members of Congress must have felt in 1939 and 1940 when Winston Churchill was, practically begging the United States to step up against the authoritarianism that was marching across Europe then. I have zero doubt in my mind that if Ukraine went the way it went in 2014 under Obama, which is what I believe Putin assumed, and the intelligence showed is what he assumed it would happen. It was easy in Crimea, it was relatively easy in eastern Ukraine, and the world did nothing. That next would be the Baltics, portions of Poland, Moldova. I mean, fully and truly recreating the old Soviet Union. That, coupled with the true threat that the Chinese Communist Party is to us, is not a world that I want my kids growing up in. A world where we have a country led by Democrat socialists or a world led by Chinese communists. So we have to take a stand now, and the Ukrainians are willing to do it, and they're doing it on their own. All they ask for are the weapons to fight Putin's army.
Why is Iran a national security interest for us?
Yeah. Well, if Iran, we've seen now the type of nuclear blackmail. The world is being reminded of the type of nuclear blackmail that a country with a nuclear umbrella can force in terms of forcing its will, in terms of the actions that it's able to undertake, and how limited or constrained we are to deal with it. That's why we were able to go into Kuwait in the 1990s and kick Saddam out, but we're not able, should we choose to do so, necessarily to go into Ukraine because of that nuclear umbrella. Imagine that with Iran. And not only imagine that with Iran, but we will have a full-blown nuclear arms race in the Middle East. The Saudis will not stand for it. The Emiratis, the Turks, and others will all want their nukes. And any type of nuclear exchange, even if it's limited in the Middle East, would be the end of the world. So this is why Iran has to be stopped, not to mention the fact that they, on a regular basis, Mark, threatened to wipe Israel off the face of the map. And I think if they're able to do so, they absolutely will.
I have found, not in every case, but a lot of cases, the sort of Putin wing of the Republican Party, I've been calling it for about a month, or the Putin wing of the Democrat Party, the Putinites in the media, that they feel the same way towards Iran in many ways. When Soleimani was taken out by Trump, they thought that was a provocation. And I'm listening and I'm thinking, are these people out of their minds? What are they talking about? How do you view this?
Well, look, I mean, we've had an isolationist wing in the party. I mentioned that, 1939, 1940. We had it in 1992, Pat Buchanan. I mean, we still have it, and we will have it. It's a relatively easy and cheap soundbite to say, bring the troops home, focus on, we need to be building roads here, not there. What it doesn't do is then say, okay, well, global terrorism still fully intends to hit us at home. I want to fight it abroad, not in our backyard. Chairman Xi of China wants to replace the United States as a global leader, and he fully intends to do so and is on a march to do so. Everything from putting a manned station on the moon to their own satellite to actually dominating global trade in East Asia, and us having a mother may I from everything from our penicillin to computer chips to the whims of the Chinese government. And then we already talked about Putin's revanchism and recreating the old Soviet Union. So these forces of evil are still afoot, still intend to threaten our way of life and our values. And if we do not continue to stick to a fully funded military that is capable of establishing deterrence, that is capable of preventing wars, that is capable of defending our interests around the world. If the United States doesn't lead, then who will? And finally, Mark, to your point on Soleimani, let's just rewind the clock and look at what Iran was up to just in the months prior. They attacked global energy supplies in Saudi with a sophisticated drone and cruise missile attack. They were attacking international shipping. They attacked our embassy. They killed an American on a base. And only then, finally, with a limited precision strike that caused zero collateral damage, did President Trump take him out. And all of that nonsense and all of that instability stopped. Deterrence was restored. And final piece, same with Russia. More Russians died under President Trump's leadership than in any modern American presidency when 300 Russian mercenaries dared to try to attack U.S. troops in Syria. Trump ordered them to be bombed. Putin saw American steel, and he stopped. These authoritarian regimes are emboldened by weakness. They are deterred by strength. They will push until they feel American steel, until they're punched in the nose. And that mentality is what Biden has walked away from. And that's why we're seeing the world on fire.